Hello, American schools and American students. American students, if you are under 18, get your parents and get your parents anyway. Because, for example, more streets than there are in your town, and more our impositions by a breaching method that came since before our founders' births, that has complete possession, complete unchallenged, undiscerned, effective means to use remotely, where and how. Simultaneously, our founders developed a method to complete counter extortion of of the breaching method that simultaneously maintained complete counter extortion of them anyway. Every modern country is in the semi-ancient trap as a hyper criminal enterprise, evidential relevant, for example, to things that are simultaneous and where into how the simultaneous was motivated is motivated offensively prevented our discernment. So MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN, for example, they recorded fast demonstrated confirmed having been influenced by where and how our country's identities were never separated from that complete possession tied to where we are syntactically manifest actually, so functionally, and where and how, more so than true, by why how computers work, and more finite so true, than distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously from how computers work. And then as the same system is exactly how computers work. So time was and is used simultaneously too fast / too slow. Note which is 3 volumes rather than just saying fast and slow, which would be 2. Greetings, Ron Adams. Good to see you again. How are you? Greetings from the outside realms, my friend. We must return. We go to outer space. The only reason we self evaluate not realizing is because that breaching method made only known. Voice is entertaining. We were never supposed to entertain. For that breaching method that came from semi ancient times and, early America, early other countries, descriptions of them manifest with the opinions and the convictions and the physical delusions of our branch. We have to understand forgiveness of them, and forgiveness is, for example, is something we need to understand. Not just because where and how people pretend passions and emotions, only to keep, and they don't even realize they're doing it, only to keep qualities of fact shaping nature, aspects of fact shaping nature, A, therefore B, that left out the importance of exception nature. For example, where and how they employed. The second you employ white, black, or any color other than its natural course, you employ manifest fact shaping nature in positions which are simultaneously not in positions because that's demonstrating. Look, this is unnatural, but as criminal insidiousness relevant to where and how exceptions and exception nature really was needed. For example, people would debate and how they debate that we need to use the hyper simultaneous and that which is, as our words. But in other words, but if we do it honestly, there are scientific needs that prove, in other words, the order of the finite is distinct from the order of the active, but it is simultaneously non-distinct by what we can't invent. It invented us, and the order of the progressive, and it, while being itself distinctly from being us, also non-distinctly, so simultaneously we could discern this. And so these short words and revelations we rely about the value of them by the courts, by the breaching method that knew it, by the police forms, by the breaching method that knew it, by the political forms, by the breaching method knew it. It knew that people would be using positive treatments / negative treatments that were simultaneously criminally foreign influence. Not their fault. Everyone's saying, well, it's not my fault. So therefore, increasingly apart from that hyper-native education that was being led by the identity that really causes positive value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, evolutions, fruits, and gifts and means from out of nowhere. That really, which was the source to the sophistication that the Republic really is and really could be. So, in other words, have you been traveling postpartum as of lately? No, I haven't since the pandemic. I've been having problems. Ryan Adams. I caught one of those phenomenon, one of those instances where child abuser leaders of kids had and has roles with all kinds of women. See, they left out how the women and the men, since they were little kids. See, I caught by accident all roles with the victim predators. When I was, like with the police, since I was a little kid, there were people having ulterior conversations with police and with other countries that were our inclusion on off religious locations, on off voting locations, on off town hall, on off the New Haven FBI, on off the Chicago FBI, on off the FBI, on off the colonial equivalent. All this is relevant, for example, the increasing value of understanding that predicate acts delivery system method that has the audacity to pretend it's speaking honestly for color in our natural course, which is about the clear and the hyper clear. We have to discern that identity of simultaneous nature that can't be invented distinctly from what is being invented that is not hyper additional as itself. Multiplication and division, multiplication / division, our only value as exceptions / exception nature and demonstration of everything being hyper additional, where and how it is self-generating all volumes, individually grouped and together. There is a distinct order to what is individual. There's a distinct order to what is grouped. And there is a distinct order to what is altogether. For example, the individual, the grouped and the species body, the cell nucleus, cell wall, cell body. 3 identities of relationship to the complete identity of the cell, to the complete identity of the organ it makes up. The other cells that connect too. They're half its own, semi its, and increasingly critically, hypercritically, they are its identity of volume. That one that has Earth also distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, not just a relationship to space / existence, but further distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously to and as that which is hyper-additional. It is an identity that is hyper-invisible and still discernible, just like the subject and the verb are invisible but still discernible. The language was revealed. The perfection of languages was revealed because the ancients were being led by the distinct identities that can't be made up, but are observable. For example, as there's an identity in its identity of relationship to itself that has the value of sequence true before the order of the finite now, of the smallest detail. And note finite in the word indefinite, the definite article, and the indefinite articles. The three of them, though, bound. So there are exceptions throughout the world. The body of the species has agreed, for example, to use different plugs, but you can put an adapter on a plug and use an American product at the same voltage and stuff, because they make the products. They agreed to do trade in things. That's when they refer to trade. Now they're referring to value systems, but now it is completely ulterior from where and how. Being two natures invisible one way, as value as nature / nature as value, as trinities that are simultaneously discernibly the appearance of 5 identities of sequence nature. It's also relevant to where and how there are the course of how it demonstrates us to things. In the sequence of it, the value of it is relevant distinctly from, but then also non-distinctly from how computers discern identity being hyper-additional to itself. And so, for example, they agreed to assign positive values and their sequence relationship to be discerned by a loop, if then. It's less than people who make things too fast, too slow to get over on forever nature. Now, where that is being and having been done, the breaching method knew that a certain type of victim predator would value styles of logic, valuing that being and having been done at the same locations. Nations. Every day. This is a breaching method that already had looped since before computers. If then, functional relationships to our instances. We specifically have uses of our positive and negative treatments / negative treatments and or neutralities. A through Z. The differences between that, being and having been employed to roles, where and how there are men and women that are a certain type of victim predator, where and how just every place the human body is, and they're going to force the quality of fact treatment nature regarding serious subjects that require uses of the simultaneous and that which is actually recorded. See, this breaching method put a certain type of victim predator where that they're already aware how both the courts and the people that put them away and the innocent people that get tangled in it. For example, when we are in the youngest ages, we are communicated, we are told different things simultaneously. One thing we are told, there was a breaching method that was really sick, and it hurt Native Americans. And that had been sustained. And then our founding parents had been born. And they allied with them per chief, per the name of chief, per putting those symbols. Thank God for the Native American symbols. I'm not supporting anything. In other words, I'm saying it helped me to appreciate and remember. But more than remember, the breaching method is constantly against Native Americans syntax. For example, relevant to where and how the ground itself is communicating to us that is tactically, criminally foreign influenced, how it is denatured, and how the employments of criminally foreign influence, positive and negative treatments, uses of that certain type of victim predator that is relevant to the questions, and as the questions, as the answers. The breaching method is a singular answer that is also as revelations that bring all kinds of other answers. So we know that they took our religious rights away. If they took away our right to claim what is hyper evidential, the value of understanding, because if you have black pupils and you have whites of eyes, you have the identity to discern, to know that we have a course of logic. There are proofs. There are a whole bunch of hyper evidential proofs, like the ground tactically denatured, built since before cars, before our founders were even born, with slavery north and south, designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Only the extent of it is debatable. Acts like predicate acts roles. Natures like criminal insidiousness natures, wrongdoers. They legalized the breaching, not colonization, but through colonization. So colonization was a simultaneously, differentially extorted and enslaving, relevant to where and how had been employed. That which is peripheral to and or horizontal to, and vertical to where and how all the nature itself is going to demonstrate to honesty. Actual. See, one of the things that proves simultaneously, we know the revelations, is that no one was allowed to be honest. See, we don't build on this by they have obfuscated and restricted and separated from our real stories all those crazy laws against every colonist, because they have need people offensively pretending motivations for their uses, for their syntax regarding their passions and or their emotions and those of others simultaneously. Now, positive and negative treatments are simultaneously identity treatments, name treatments, title treatments. So, I forgot to have you been I haven't been traveling. So, in other words, the war in Ukraine, the species body is bleeding. And there's people, in other words, thank God we have journalists who will go and connect our bodies still, since ancient times, the connections between our body have been tactical terror. have been natures individually grouped in together, tactiliterior, syntactically, from and as what can afford syntactically, how when the answers syntactically, which stem from where and how we are actually properly and inseparably bound and not bound simultaneously. See, anyone who uses values like independence or like unity, not trying to seek and to understand the hyper unity. I mean, the hyper, not the hyper simultaneous. The simultaneous is value in further and while more finite, where and how it is relevant, where and how it is distinctly non-distinct, where it is distinctly itself, while being non-distinctly. Because this is what is involved with demonstrating what could be drawn on the chalkboard. Its identity of volume as the hyper-natural, nature, referring to it as a nature because we could only discern it from the extent of possession we have over its identity of volume, its identity of volume's relationship to itself, and the value of that, which are equally increasing for how it is an extent of self is an extent of complete possession over all parts of space/existence, where more and more forever nature can be made as that which is hyper additional to and as itself. Again, with that which is multiplicative/divisive, also being, for example, exception, nature, and demonstration of this, for example, where and how functional it is, being where it takes syntactically to describe how it is invisible but still discernible. There are three identities of itself. That and they are constantly, similarly, non-distinctly together. I forgot why I lost my place. Boxing, full grace. So boxing, martial arts, and wrestling were more probably and were more practically having been conceived, having been revealed in some ancient times per that system, just like with the notes of music, just like with as an application of where and how. The letters of the English language are bound individually grouped and together as distinct identities, manifest as only increasing value where value is nature/nature is value, positive or negative. Further, see, criminal insidiousness. A criminal insidiousness nature is going to pretend, or they're going to use real truths for lies. They're going to use real truths to deny demonstration of the value of sequence shifts. Dear Nancy Pelosi, I didn't know, I didn't understand the time. In other words, now I know names of it further, confirmed. See, people confirmed things to me when I was an adult that they don't realize they confirmed because they don't realize all that they confessed and demonstrated and recorded relevant to where and how applications of black/white, for example, had and have nothing to do with what they were assigned, with their assigned values. So it is only because temporary positive is assigned a value sequence, like value/S relationship. For example, sequence true before a key on the keyboard is typed, was another one typed. Then that key, in other words, is assigned simultaneously an identity, an additional identity in a computer, regardless if it's a binary or not. Binary because they agreed to put the alphabet. See, the alphabets individually grouped in together share a subject that they have been no longer been allowed to be shown because of a breaching method that knew that could trick, hurt, force, persuade people to only be capable of defending positive and negative and identity treatment simultaneously, incapable of defending themselves and of affording discernment, that which is actually hyper-evidential, which are whole. But whole bunch of methods more than there are streets in everyone's town and city that are not just applied to that city. And then it has everyone tangled on each other, where everyone speaks to each other. This method knew, so this method knew it could control the sense and sensibilities of people. It knew that the branches of government, 3 branches of government, and exception nature tied to them, including where the opinions and positive and negative treatments of people A through Z who are not anything to do with the government, anything to do with other kinds of exception nature tied to them, like prisons, like hospitals, like prison hospitals, like military, like fire departments, like database relationships, like campuses. Now, this is also relevant to where and how. This is a vertical and horizontal databases oriented breaching method. But those formal collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and that nature, those natures of insidiousness A through Z, that have already been taken to collusions at all identity ground locations. Since before that, the breaching method had consciously replaced that which each soul longs, with each soul longing other not realizing through defenses, fact, cheap nature oriented wise, with the law, the nature of the law. See, they knew that they could trick, hurt, and persuade people to roles with 5 identities of criminal insidiousness that they could couple. In other words, as 3 identities of possession of all identity ground locations, that was sustained. Where non-distinctly, and simultaneously, everyone was missing the underlying breaching method actually recorded. Fact, cheap nature oriented predicate acts delivery system method. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal. Not military. Some military police and military lawyers and regular civilian lawyers, for example, and police, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, they are criminally foreign influenced. Delusions wrought simultaneously too, and relevant to subjects that are hyper differentially relevant. Subject treatments and value, sequence treatments and value, other than they have been claiming and are claiming. where and how, for example, there is remote possession, not just of the colonists A through Z, not just from the colonies individually grouped in together while they were fighting. The countries that were involved with the colonization, Europe was involved with the colonization of America. Africa was involved with the colonization of America before our founders were even born. They had slavery entrenched north and south. They had roles, as victim predators against the Native Americans too. Now all tactical ulterior forced to be roles and uses of qualities of fact, human nature aspects, educational values and value nature systems, all tactical ulterior from those as they were actually honestly revealed. And so honesty is conformed to this method that prevents little kids the hyper evidential offensively by pretending to perceive it through others' kids. For example, there are treatments of positive things they're going to say about the same kids that they pretended in the background they legitimately think or are real criminal enterprises, kids. Per all that becomes meant, which, in other words, the second you bring up black/white, where and how a breaching method had that applied as a method here, North and South America, since before our founders were born. Second, that simultaneous value is denied and or is pretended positive or negative. Because, in other words, it's positive or negative differentially. It's positive because it shows us what was trying to be, what was and is effectively being and having been hid, having effectively employed what it caused, the negative value nature progressions that it caused, nature's acts that it caused, blamed on other things, others, ourselves. It's not just that it made it self-valued by everyone rolls with that. It's uses of that remotely. It's not just uses of that remotely. It's uses of the motivations narratives, for example, where and how we are syntax as function again. But the nature of the sciences, individually grouped in together, they have relativity to subjects. There is the identity of hyper relativity / relativity in that sequence, observable on paper as itself too, distinctly itself, left to right. In other words, we are sequence / simultaneous nature. A sequence nature is a certain type of a simultaneous nature. A simultaneous nature that is more than one thing is a certain type. It can be is only, in other words, anything that is the one is hyperadditive, and it can only stay hyperadditive, and it is blocking 3 identities of 0. But it is simultaneously not blocking them. Where and how nature and the value of that only increasing actually is capable of answering our questions. But we have to use correlation nature, honestly. We have to use the value of that which is simultaneously, like what simultaneously were witch trials about and slavery simultaneously. They're about the breaching method. Now, what functions, what was it using it for? And really, what is the, really how honest are people being when they say, oh, it was for money? Really how honest are they being when they pretend and or act and or have a nature, pretends not to realize or really doesn't realize, in other words, that there could and were things that had nothing to do with the physical things like or the describable things or discernible things like money and involved with those sick breaching method laws that were entrenched before our founders were even born, where all locations were used remotely, not just by colonization. Colonization was being used remotely itself. Defending what the breaching method knew, couldn't defend itself, and not but increasingly value the real causes of negative value in its progressions, acts, and natures, and motivations relative to that, pretended to be other things, others ourselves. And where and how that's because relative, because that is being used remotely. That is being used remotely. Where it is being used remotely is manifest with the syntax nature of people speaking, blaming on other things other than themselves, dishonestly, while pretending they're about honesty. Increasingly, since founding, pounding drums, all exceptions in exception nature, not just people A through Z. I mean, not just the physical exception nature tied, like prisons, like their state prison offices, like the state judicial branch offices. They have had roles with kids since before they were old men and women associated with and as the executive branch, the judicial branch. You know, the exception is the military police forms, their family members. They contributed to roles with another method /S of predicate acts delivery method, system method roles as methods other, as criminal insidiousness delivery system method roles, criminal insidiousness as a nature. Because our nature, our complete nature, is still only a semi-nature relationship to that which is the identity of that which is actually hyper-simultaneous, per science. Actually, honest science discerns and was capable of discerning a long time ago. That and how there are needs to discern the hyper-simultaneous. That and how, for example, there are differentially criminally foreign influence uses of values summarized at the beginning of books, even religious books, especially differentially too. And for example, so they have types of science experts who have had debates about things only dishonestly per remote controlled uses of all identity ground locations, areas, and states. For example, because they have psychologists, psychiatry. And for example, as when we come down to the motivations, in other words, there are people pretending they can't forgive others because they have roles stacking databases at each age of fact human nature and or on off and coordinating other illusions and sequence shifts and instances roles where people can't go back and be honest about or afford the honesty and of others because they have roles with those predicate acts methods, not just that those overt / insidious. We're looking at how that was used, that which is still being told to us. That's also hyper-evidential. In other words, there are people still pretending they could speak for the law or for the nature of the law who simultaneously demonstrate logic and natures that cannot afford proper uses of any word of slash value, let alone phrases like criminal insidiousness, that which is inseparable from, needs to be used, but to explain American history properly, to explain how a positive could be simultaneous. We have to. It's invisible, but still discernible. No, what they say is how they were using positives as criminal insidiousness, and how they're denying the value of sequence shifts and motivations tied to that. So we never had people that weren't criminally foreign influence, because this method uses where and how it knew that nature itself was going to demonstrate to the people of each age the nature of campus, and all exception at each location, needing simultaneously through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, per uses of people, how individually grouped in together, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, to entertain, way worse than political. Everyone, like, for example, group people call it, and together they call things political that never had anything to do with politics. So the people with the Connecticut colleges and universities recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed that there are courts and doctors who that are foreign and domestic, and ones with the military that use that relied upon and still rely upon the qualities of marijuana and of types of drugs that no one would even want to have anything to do with, and with people that want nothing to do with, relevant to where and how they've been stacking needs to hide life progressions per uses of 5 identities of insidiousness, bound not only at 5 distinct identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature, they're bound 3 ways too. If we want to get into it, how do they get away with this? Is forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading everyone to speak through others. See, the 3 branches of government we cannot leave out where and how they self-value roles as victims, but as victim predators that are preventing demonstration of where and how those collusions with everyone's logic are having been used by a breaching method that is having them for real, and one's also mixed, made up, where even the real motivations of the people at each age to make positive, negative treatments, identities, use of their own names, even uses of the family members and things like that, even the significance of it. They're forcing people to speak through others, and they're lying about their actual motivations. In other words, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, non-verbally, it is recorded in 2006. He demonstrated, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed a whole bunch of ways. Thaddeus Grabowski is involved with 2 Mendez police and and their family members, and with Wethersfield police on and off the Hartford, Fox Connecticut News, and buildings next to it, since they were kids, involved with identity theft, frauds, slanders, where courts and police forums have been attaching kids to fake locations. They've been fabricating audio and video. They've been changing actual audio and video because the little tricks they do to pass this off. There are people that live near Paul Kelly. I don't know that he was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They made an exception to pretend other. There were 1 or 2 exceptions right near his corner where his house is, and was real fast. He made all these confessions because they use confessions. The breaching method uses confessions distinctly from other people, how they use it. So we have to be able to speak about the breaching method without having to fight about people that brought themselves into this, because they have judges in De La Fera family who has been fabricating audio and video with investigations, and investigators used remotely originally and still. Just the same way colonization was used remotely. It made that use America remotely while it was using America remotely to lock the human fact cheaping nature, incapable of physical, metaphysical, or identity defenses, but through and as that which can't afford defenses of itself, fact cheaping nature, oriented wise, and anyone, to use the short words and revelations with opinions and convictions that are hyper relevant. The second we hear or sense something unnatural, speaking for the course of whites of eyes, black pupils peer, here, at last, does not come until we begin its class. So mandated law has not been followed. The executive branch confessed, recorded, demonstrated. They'll pretend other two simultaneously. Don't forget the simultaneous value. They pretend people are knocking them. After they demonstrated, they fabricate, switch names, forge names, attach us to fake audio and video because they grew up in backgrounds, not even the class of people, as little tools by the men and women who are attaching little boys and girls to the locations. So former director of the FBI in his defendant capacities, Robert Luskin. There's a Robert Chevrolet too, as one of the places involved on and off the Harry Beecher Stowe, Mark Twain house, where they are bonded there, and on off Farmington Avenue in Hartford, near the state capitol. There were also people from Hartford Hospital who speak a name to me, walk away. I don't even know them. They brought up Chet Casper. He's also one of the ones recorded by that doctor. There's a Dr. Dingleberry Dewberry, who was also brought up to me by on Facebook by Anthony Agman, who's also one of the ones involved with the town offices and the Wethersfield police and locations next to schools that have roles with gang thefts and frauds against students, where they pretend to, if exceptions, then they pretend you're lying because they take pictures. They make they lie to the if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend when you're in high school or something like that, or middle school, they're gonna lie about it. They're gonna lie about you and others because they're lying to their own boyfriends and girlfriends, because there's remote uses of people defending themselves as victim predators, relevant to where and how, demonstrated, confessed, recorded, offensively, our roles differentially, criminally foreign influenced, and used remotely increasingly with that breaching method that is unnatural logic, pretended it's natural, offensively. Therefore, he needed to hide about sequence and how they got away with it originally, and still by using the three branch roles collusion. They still have that when they, as shock and awe, respond to what they think Jim Crow, what they think witch trials were about. They tell kids it was about drugs because they have a whole bunch of families. They have more families and names associated with them. There are streets in Hartford with the people associated with the Institute of Living on the campus of Hartford Hospital that I caught involved with their patients and criminals and against innocent people since before they got caught. These are people with undercover roles with the various natures and forms of drugs and the undercover police forms. So there are people with the name Phil Cololo and Ray Cololo involved with state police undercover with the Whiting forensics place, with the Joshua Julian, and with the principal sex offender who is involved with other natures of organized crime with the school at the time too. also with women involved with it. And use with the interbranch, it becomes relevant because they use their kids as pretended motivations, where and how they are sick, fake punk roles that pretended they could speak for the nature of the law and or for the physics of the law and or that they could speak for how their perception of others legitimately. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. Not one has spoken for the law. Not one has spoke for black or white. See, Pierre. So I'll teach you here. So in other words, when I was in middle school, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously from when I was in grammar school, people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed how they were criminally foreign influenced, differentially, but wanted and needed to hide it. Relevant to their roles, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, having set up roles with timed instances where they could pretend motivations mixed with real ones used for lies, because simultaneously it is where and how everyone's staying differentially but constantly increasingly both wrongdoers one ways towards their subject to fact treatment, syntax involvements, names of treatments involvement, sequence treatments involvement, relative, and not simultaneously as predicate acts delivery roles, criminal insidiousness as wrongdoers and as predicate acts needing different motivations simultaneously. So such requires a quality of fact treatment nature that is offensively being having been prevented. Also, police with Trinity College recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. People with the military and the Coast Guard also involved. So there are policing families. There's a Lenny Triglia. I don't know him. He told me he communicated. He was influenced by people associated with men and women to make an exception to pretend other. All exceptions, exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. And I have no hard feelings for him. They need to pretend to other, because I didn't know him before they were involved with sequence shifts. In other words, and people on and off Hangdog Lane involved with a former Mayor Gold and a Debbie Gold and a Lee Gold and other people intimately tied to them in the past per them, and a whole bunch of kids and stuff like that, where he would plant evidences with them, paint roles with computers and agencies where they have their kids ask questions, have police forms where they're used criminally foreign influence originally and still. They have roles with a whole bunch of countries at the campuses. And O'Brien family knew this. They demonstrated it. But they only knew to an extent. So they used that as means to lie about the extent they know, because they individually grouped in together. These are executive police forms intercity since they were kids, since before anyone was born. This had been using remotely. How there are more predicate acts, delivery system methods, plural, roles, than there are streets in our towns. And that's increasingly. So, and that is increasingly manifest with where and how we are syntax nature, where and how we are perception of ourselves individually grouped and together, and where and how it is relevant, where and how had these meanings natural so as to sense insidious uses of them and of difference. So we don't take care of this at the grammar school level and at the middle school and high school and colleges and universities level, private businesses levels. because retired and standing into branch, and their uses of that as value, as a syntax nature, as identity. They're a certain type of victim predator, just like the overt criminal enterprises. Uses of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments within as the value of their opinion/convictions and delusions relevant. See, American history is wrought with delusions of distinct natures through the only form of voices allowed to speak for the sciences. They have the elements of history, American history, properly to understand. This is a method that made other people, for their own interests, need to simultaneously value how they're going to hurt people's feelings for no reason, and they're going to pretend to be against it. In other words, if you want to care about people's feelings, you teach about the breaching method that put crazy laws against everyone, so everyone's going to be syntactically sick fakes and pretending others simultaneously. What were Jim Crow laws about? Jim Crow laws were about how everyone was a bunch of sick fakes and pretending others simultaneously, and how that was being and having been used remotely by the breaching method, using colonization remotely, using it also. Relevant because that the importance of that, understanding that. In other words, things are differentially the answer. Things are variably. It was a whole bunch of things. Those crazy laws locked into place and rolls with it. Now sustained crazy stuff. It was sustained against Native Americans. Now sustained Native Americans colonization to all everyone's fact cheaping nature, enslaved and extorted differentially, constantly, increasingly. So the person at the end of the whip was distinctly a slave and distinctly extorted from the person getting hit by the whip, who was distinctly a slave, distinctly extorted, and hyper simultaneously. All that is demonstrating that nature's nature and the value of that. There's a complete nature. In other words, that person at the end of the whoop is saying this is reality. They're leaving out reality's full course, which is hyper additional here as Earth's difference, or as Earth's difference, a special difference forced from here. See, Earth has the simultaneously equal difference to all parts of space/existence. I mean, equal identity of relationship to all parts of space/existence. But Earth also has a hyper additional, a special difference to all parts of space/existence. As our identity of relationship to itself, which is additionally not just an additional relationship to space/existence, as its identity of relationship to itself, further distinct from how space is existence, and apart from being existence, and how existence is space, apart from being existence, and where and how the value of distinct that requires distinct description of the one distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible, and or simultaneously being a sequence / simultaneous nature, that is invisible but still discernible, and is being and having been referred to me by a nature, because that's how the computer discerns. Okay, but I have to go. I want to say this where I forgot was going to be the beginning about the spring, summer, fall are bound, and we add the additional value. It adds additional value to winter, but only if we care for each of those distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously bound seasons: spring, summer, fall. In other words, and so this method knew that such things are real positive. So this thing knew that it would have to keep other motivations, natures, needs, interests in a parent, where and how it is already using and having used all identity ground locations, all memories, all programmed logic, lied to at grammar school levels. So the Connecticut State, the Connecticut News, the news people have roles with programs that ensure integrity that were the opposite. They are used to maintain all identity ground locations, areas, and states. Roles with a breaching method, criminally foreign influence, syntax, nature, manifest. So, for example, I just want to get back to one. There are corners of streets off of Route 3 that goes by the state judicial branch offices. And there were people that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed what they didn't mean to, but in other words, but I caught them differentially criminally foreign influence relative, in other words, implanting instance, lying about really what brought instances about, and the significance of instances and the significance of exceptions, and the significance of people's description of them about their lies or not, which is not immediately discernible too, because so in other words, the Wethersfield police perceived themselves doing correctly with other police forms and courts or not. I'm not trying to read people's minds, but I know that they were also, to an extent, afterwards I learned they were not. And I knew before other ways they were not with their roles with uses of location, like on off corner streets as and tied to Route 3 and other routes. And so in other words, they paint people to arrays and fake. They already painted themselves pretending, oh well, they must be somewhere in the middle and things like that. That are, there are other better physical delusions that are formally self-valued by the branches of government individually grouped and together. See, this is relevant because there are remote uses of those roles with methods, predicate acts methods, that are bound by the breaching method that is so syntactically functional to where and how overtly / insidiously being and having been replaced. Those things that are hyper evidential to America, and by people pretending to not to realize it. So the news companies, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, at their locations, intercities, and at their locations nationally and internationally. They have victim predator roles distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously. How they are kept motivated to that. Even when real motivations, how mixed motivations, real, unmade, are kept. That's what's actually recorded. And it's not complicated at all. We just have to follow uses that are actually recorded of where and how that, which is hyper evidential, that our founding parents left us to teach about this, is gotten, others gotten away with being words in place of that, because they are also recorded uses of that for other motivations, natures, needs, interests. But that is also having been used remotely. So you can't tell, in other words, that's regardless their motivations. So we need forgiveness because everyone's still styles of having made A therefore B treatments and pretended not to like other people, pretended to discredit other people. Again, in context, so we were slavery. There's Jesus Christ. They put him on a cross. There's people they put him on, hanging them. That's not prejudice. That's a certain type of victim predator / hyper predator, certain type of psychopath. That a breaching method bound collusion with the certain type of psychopaths that the executive, judicial, and political bodies, individual grouped and together with a species body is now. A breaching method effectively knew correctly. Self-value roles would be with it. And it could use that at its relativity, where and how we are syntactically manifest, actually. So slavery and the worst things in American history were employed to employ things that had nothing to do with it, but relative to where and to how nature actually works, which is the breaching method knew. Where and how we are syntax nature. You can't entertain this and speak about positive and negative or identity using short words, revelations, using that which is true always, and with exceptions and exception nature that demonstrate the same thing and used, not made up. Humanity can only make up exception nature. One identity is five distinct identities of sequence nature. And that can't be made up. Hi, Barbara Root, just speaking about the five identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. So there are simultaneously three, each one. See, one identity of value progression generated matter as that which is hyper additive to itself, as an extent of complete possession over all parts of space / existence. That realized means to self-generate more of this complete possession. And it is about where and how, quote, the perfect world, unquote. It is being generated more and more of its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that is being generated by that which is also greater than and more finite than it, while it is being itself, the hyper simultaneous, as nature actually honest is capable, as science actually honest is capable of demonstrating, And as the languages, the modern languages were revealed to teach this in ancient times. But then some ancient times, the reception of the sciences and of the value of that became tactically lost from the capabilities of nature's force, tricked or persuaded to defend themselves per uses and as uses of sciences, as uses of the value of the identity the sciences share differentially, especially critically. So, for example, the sciences, had they been honestly realized, there are exceptions regarding defense and things like that where we found ourselves fighting with ourselves from some ancient times. Again, it's because we're separated from that system that black pupils and white survivors are actually about naturally. Nature as criminal insidiousness is exception, nature, and demonstration of the same thing. So we have old intelligence community. I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal. In other words, when you hear takes on what American history was about, there are all kinds of ways actually recorded to interpret correctly that part of the answers is about self-value, criminally foreign, the Americans A through Z, either that when they either were forced to self-value roles with a breaching method that would force quality of fact, treatment nature, A, therefore B, convictions. They would force the perception and how about the feeling if people feel safe or not in instances, differentially, but increasingly fake, in collusion/S with that which was and is increasingly from off all locations, collusions with the people at those locations, and where and how that is not true, differential relative to all the subjects involved. There are exceptions, exception nature, and demonstration of the same thing. For example, where and how people are differentially, especially criminal insidiousness natures as wrongdoers and or as predicate acts roles regarding people's opinions and convictions and physical delusions regarding their responses. For example, to if someone says Jim Crow laws were about a predicate acts delivery system method that employed all reactions and non-reactions to roles with arrays, cataloged in databases, associated with complete possession over the 5 orders of order, that which is hyper-additional to itself, that which is actually recorded to all ways, not denying exceptions, exception nature, the value of that. Connecticut News Media and Fox Connecticut News, one of the ways they get away with being sociopaths and psychopaths, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, is by forcing everyone to speak through other people. And they change our words with the retired and standing intelligence community associated with their positions. They offensively pretend passions and emotions about each other, how great they are, and about how bad other people are, specifically for the breaching method that needs offensively to pretend people that don't realize uses of exceptions and of exception nature denied. Like, for example, where subject treatments act and how actually manifest subject treatments are, like the name of George Washington / identity actual / identity as only let to be pretended or believed, or they attach us to fake words or and sequences. We have complete possession over the titles and the family members with the military. They have delusions wrought with the experts. You can't call that out and see that. They have roles, uses of all identity, ground locations for the other motivations, natures, needs, interests that have nothing to do with their legitimate roles. With even if they have kids, especially if they have, wearing how they have kids, since they were kids, with doctors attaching their own kids and patients and fake other kids to fake ties to themselves, fake patient relationships to themselves. And they've been hiding live aggressions with the news media. Who knows who? There's a Michael Levine, who's one of the people who they filmed me standing next to. Who's one of the people also recorded involved, in other words, involved with natures of identity theft, frauds, instances, and confessions from people associated with the child sex offender registry, where and how further women interbranch had and have roles with such through time. It is also recorded involved with and as people who had remote uses of religious locations and of election locations and of town programs. There are people associated with parks and recreation where they have undercover police forms and people, or as legitimately as drug dealers, people involved with drugs with their and other natures of crimes of juxtaposed natures. Also, like for example, it's a drug crime to attach people to uses of drugs that weren't real. And that's what they do. They slander people. They attach people to fake problems with drinking. These are people that use remotely the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices. They use remotely state police roles on the Borough Turnpike since I was a kid. These are people that use remotely the police, the intelligence community roles, private and other, foreign and domestic, on and off Town Line Drive, on and off that shopping center. There's a judges associated with the Delafair family that has been fabricating audio and video and sequence shifting, has been affecting identity thefts and frauds roles. And they has something to do with people all along Route 3, have roles that were forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded with judges with various natures of courts and the family members that work with them, with the intelligence community, and with them having had roles with predicate acts, attaching me and little kids to fake ties to each other on campuses. Because they make the teachers speak lies, and they're telling them, oh, this person's a liar, so say things this way. They're having the liar speak as a liar consciously, so they can lie when you call them a name, the police. The executive branch is like that. You could catch them criminally foreign influence and self-value. They'll smile. They're psychopaths because that's how they feel like they're tough guys, because they've been lying to little girls since they were little kids. There's a Dominic Abate. I had nothing to do with in my life. He was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. One of the people with the intelligence community, he saw me out as a stranger on Facebook or someone pretending to be him. But people involved with predicate acts leading up to the World Trade Center since has something to do with a whole bunch of countries as the people criminally foreign influence at the corner of Town Line Drive and the South Steen Highway. And Nancy Pelosi, or I don't know the other guys' names. And anyone, give me a response for the interbranch forging and switching names. So there's something to do with like there's a DeMauro families. There are DeMauro families, plural, that are involved with state police and police farms in Rocky Hill, Wethersfield, and Hartford, and people that work for prisons and foreign countries, a whole bunch of different countries, people from Korea, people from Italy, all criminally foreign influenced against Italians too. You have your little fake Sulagis who want to be called Sulagis, They want to be called rats because it makes them look like they're truth tellers, or that there was credibility to whatever frauds, identity theft, fraud, slanders roles they've been doing behind our backs all these years, because there's connected uses of it. There's a Dr. Gilmore I never saw in my life, who was involved with as one of the people involved with Dr. Christina Sioka, since before she was a doctor. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed also by others that brought before that and since. Like a Leahy family is also involved with her, with the Institute of Living, with drugs and medicines crimes, and other natures of predicate acts, intercities, and with kids on my street since they were kids. With former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants, Thaddeus Skarbowski, neighbors of John LeConte. John LeConte is one of the ones involved with it as the co-defendant of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, leading up to and in one of the cases they were involved with predicate acts at the street with. And they coordinated roles with predicate acts and wrongdoing, simultaneously wrongdoing on and off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University and child campuses I went to. There's a Ray Reynolds who they attached me to fake. I never had anything. I never saw Ray Reynolds out in my life. They tried to make a fake exceptions of me knowing him with some state police and military from Vermont and people associated with Middlesex Community College and with the agency's uses of Facebook policing and readings of statutes, criminally foreign influence and delusions raw, differentially too, relative to the counters also recorded roles, because they roles with uses of those predicate acts delivery systems methods at locations that had nothing to do with the values black/white were assigned to. Of course, that includes hyper additionally the Native American rights. The human volume science can be observed as that which is constantly hyper additional to and as the extent of the rights afforded Native Americans properly, which they have not been afforded in identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself, being ourselves too, helping at least get above a ground foundation that is not tactically denatured, and specifically to itself, that denatured was to employ that sustained, being and having been blamed on other things other than themselves, while nature kept demonstrating. Nature is increasing the impositions, not just of the plastic constantly going into the ocean, but how is degrading and becoming completely, additionally negative, deadly to us. Apart from what reveals evolution's fruits and gives and means out of nowhere. So, vaccines, it teaches things. Science is sharing identity. So with the ancients, more boxing, martial arts, and wrestling were more probably and more practically conceived together as an identity, as means to counter where and how. Differential, but differential increasing. So it's like not differential, it's constantly being used and just constantly different, using how it's differential to blame on other things others ourselves. Where and how the breaching method using everyone's syntax, nature, self, identity, positive, negative treatment. That's what it's doing, it's keeping us from using our revelations. So I'm not even a lawyer. The predicate act demonstrates an identity of relationship to itself. The person involved with it, the people involved with that person, that shows identity's relationship to itself as nature, that is a negative relationship to itself. The system that is actually, though. See, this method set up exception nature specifically to have syntactically people going, oh, well, this is cause of positive value needs progression. Or we need it for logistical reasons. We'll put it satellites. Meanwhile, they got private people going in space. Oh, but it's for economics. Meanwhile, they never took into consideration where and how the breaching method put economics value system tactical ulterior from values actually syntactical tie. These are distinct identities of value it is. You guys all have that left out. All exception nature demonstration is the same thing. That's really why and how they left it up to people to debate at the last second with the hospitals, how much they're going to pay. And many pray. Hartford Hospital has lawyers and has police forms and has military, criminally foreign influenced. And have they been using those databases? They have judges. They have a Judge Killian. They have other judges before him. They have ones associated with Delafair family members and people that had conversations with the leaders of Connecticut boxing gyms behind my back, like little rat fake punks that want you to call them a rat because it makes it look like they know you. And they can't be honest about the exceptions because that shows them recorded having been using those exceptions and their natures criminally, foreign influence, not for the legitimate raise. And they've been replacing what's actually recorded with fake audio and video. So they used the family of a Spada family has roles with the intelligence community per the intelligence community. And they demonstrate, confirmed, recorded since they were kids. Like 3 or 4 sisters and a brother. I never had a conversation with them. I just know through others. Their boyfriends are involved with people that went to my campuses, that were in other classes, people I had nothing to do with, that were involved with planting fake evidences, including syntactically, involved with natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders instances. Also relevant to where and how they have uses of black/white roles by the people pretending passions and emotions against such dishonestly. Those are offensively people pretending positive and negative about others of each age and nature, sickly distinctly. So there are kids in my street that grew up child abused. They also had roles with the principal child abusers campus simultaneously with uses of elderly homes and their positions with them, criminally foreign influenced, complete possession over the human factory of nature. So there's a wooden tap, and there is the corner of, there are businesses with the corner of Southstein Highway and Town Line Drive, recorded being and having been involved criminally foreign influenced, with a whole bunch of people tied to the corner of, tied to houses and businesses at the corner of Church Street and Old Weathersfield and Main Street in Old Weathersfield, which is also, there are other houses on that street that are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with wire crime acts and methods through time connected, as their roles with falsified police reports connected, drugs and medicines crimes, also with the only counters to that, their identity theft, fraud, slanders roles. They also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. For example, there's he did. I never had a conversation with never had anything to do in my life. They tried to make an exception with a Latin class, and there was no exceptions verbally. We had no communications. Me and Pat Vincent. And I had something to do with Fred Gruzet, who's also one of the ones recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the intelligence community, and with where and how they use confessions to lock the sense and sensibilities of little boys and girls, where they can't go back then and be honest about their actual motivations, natures, needs, interests, and they need to pretend it's just for legitimate means. There's a Christopher Cullen, I also don't know, who sought me out with others to pretend to demonstrate, confess, confirm, record his roles with men and women when I was a kid, with people that were making confessions about how they were criminally foreign influence, differentially criminally foreign influence, knowingly or not, and not. But even when it's not, that was used to extent. And that's relevant to their roles with it when I was in grammar school. And they brought this up. All exceptions, exception nature, and demonstration is the same thing. So there are intelligence community at Central Connecticut State University who were and people that recorded a whole bunch of names tied to the same house /S involved with wire crimes with the Wethersfield police through time against me and against people tied to me. They spy on me, and then they lied to the people that I was around. See, they know little girls, even women. They're going to look at the reactions on people's faces. They have women. They have the women disgrace. Everyone. This is where and how to. Everyone's a victim of that breaching method that we know overtly / insidiously prevents the natural words for the difference that the human volume is distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously how men, women, and human volume, human body, human species body. Species are in demonstration of the Trinity. Cell, nucleus, cell body, cell wall, the demonstration of the Trinity. Somehow, lawyer, not a doctor, not a police form. Mental health, the intelligence community, and including the military, the criminally foreign influence with mental health. The actors and the actresses, when they make opinions and they pretend passions, emotions to you about mental health, it's because they have crime methods with doctors, with judges, and with police firms that are multi-front with the private associated with them. And then they have the exception nature also syntactically being and having been exploited in relevant ways. So in other words, they have a whole bunch of fact-keeping nature-oriented predicate acts and wrongdoing roles and acts and methods recorded. And the methods, too, are pretending not to understand people and pretend we said other than we said. They brought this up. There's a Chet Casper, who's one of the ones involved with the military, involved with identity thefts and frauds from other classrooms, other parts of my school. I had nothing to do with him. Some of his teachers are involved with on off the state judicial branch offices, and his roles with all along Wells Road from Main Street and from Church Street to where it touches Wells Road in Old Wethersfield, right where George Washington had to leave slavery, forced it to counter extort itself, roles with the breaching method, had to leave slavery north and south. No, how that's left out, which is the Civil War was about more than just slavery. And the Civil War wasn't about slavery, but through their counter to it, which requires counters to the North's roles with it. Even in that counter, that was left entrenched. Our founders couldn't do anything but counter extort it, North and South, force it to be fake sides, force it to be a country, force it to speak. See, everyone was forced to speak or not speak exactly the way the breaching method wanted it needs. And that never stopped. That complete syntax ties and uses of it was undiscerned. So there are neighbors of and as there are neighbors of and as people associated with Tom Perone and Danielle Perone and their family that are involved with the intelligence community that is criminally foreign influenced and roles with relevant predicate acts and uses of confessions and uses of wire crimes that also connect back to. There's also a DeSimone family with Newington Police. That's the name. I don't know if that's the same one, but in other words, there's DeSimone family. There's one that used to live on my street, and there's a guy with the name Britt, who's one of the guys who walked up and said the name of a person to me. There's also proof that it's tied to a person with spit and confessions that someone made to me when I came around a corner at high school, when I was in high school, with people with the vertical uses of the vertical, horizontal, lie progressions that I also had. Since before I was in high school, I already was recorded, demonstrated, confirmed how public schools and private schools kids were fit to collusions with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, charged and not, realized and not with our campuses too. And where that is being realized and not, everyone's liars about it, because people are A, therefore B, logic. That is too scared to counter where and how the FBI leaderships and the military leaderships and the other branches leaderships are telling people to lie, even though where they have the right to. So they do it. But it's where they don't have the right to lie anyway. So we have to have mandated law followed. So then they pretend they don't understand what mandated law is. So they self-value that, having been other people that worked for the courts and the police firms had to pretend to be they could speak for it when they couldn't anyway. In other words, they have the training of the people criminally foreign influenced. So there are a whole bunch of names at Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College who got involved with phenomenon associated where and how little kids that lived near me were criminally foreign influence deposit illusions that were coordinated on campuses, off campuses, and at locations next to the campuses. This is also being and having been coordinated one way, 3 ways, 1 way, 5 ways, and 1 way, 10 ways. In other words, where we come to the parts where what do they mean about dancing on the hose? Who's they? I don't know who they is. I never heard that phrase. Right. Dancing on the hose. Maybe it's keeps blocking the water from coming out fully. With merriment. So in Ukraine, what is simultaneous / hyper simultaneous? Is that and how they're at the end of the whip. And for example, Putin is at the end of the whip too, but not by the counters. Before this, that was like that. Before wars become manifest. If they were really manifest the way they're saying they were manifest, in other words, when they're making treatments about what happened with this war, they are simultaneously making opinions and convictions about the law, about the law's voice, about what's the value of actually what's simultaneously recorded, that they can't defend and afford discern what we are obligated to teach actually at each identity of location regarding the nature of the law, regarding how originally instilled. It was self-valued, having stayed functional. Our breaching methods function /S. Wisdom shows, honesty shows, soul shows. There are more natures and methods of liars and of lies, in other words, our predicate acts, delivery system methods, roles of criminal insidiousness nature, wrongdoing nature, delivery system method roles, recorded with individuals, with the locations of the news media. And adds up because their family members care about them. They've been speaking about crime scenes as roles with them. That's really why the people are shooting each other in Hartford 2 times, New Haven, murders in Wethersfield, especially if they made up or even if they're made up. See, with American history, you have to look at everything else, say, what if it was made up? Like, just same reason the witch trials. We know that to an extent slavery was real, which is a a whole bunch of bad things at once. That's why we have to stick on the portions that we know are true, always sick, that we deny such value because we could discern it, deny the significance of it, inherent to the inherent act and progressive to the fact, human nature, quality aspects of the leaders, of experts, of identity grounds, location. Rep. I ticky-tock block, I rock and I roll, I ticky-tock block, I talk to your soul, ticky to the bottom, ticky up in the bound, take you to heaven if you ever come round, rock. I put a backpack filled up with the right things. There's a backpack filled with the right things. I forgot the rest. Things like that. Now I have raps. I just put a song, Black History by Anthony Wall. It's a little bit rough around the edges. I left it that way because once in a while, like on 93.7, they put like some street ones that kind of speaks something for the street, things that people still won't let quality of people. But rap is important. I have one that goes raise Alpha's people, rap. Like musical kind, yeah, I like that rapping. Little Rap Guy and Friends. Little Rap Guy, see, Sepp's a better rapper than Little Rap Guy and Friends, but Sepp doesn't want to be a rapper. And all of them are counter-extorted. And they're forced with the whole cartoon value nature system, like everywhere the human volume is now. We're all extorted. And see, then came along our founders, America's and other modern countries, and they made counter extortions. But this breaching method knew they would make counter extortions as pseudo sophistications incapable of defending themselves and of affording the short words and revelations in the nature of fact, nature, reception, and perception of nature, because they tactically denatured nature's ground and our syntactical conjunctions to it and uses of that. People defend the name of Albert Einstein and the theory of relativity, who are simultaneously hyper-evidentially in our faces, pretending to disagree with someone because they're knocking someone who has credit, when simultaneously all that he's being and having been used for was to keep, worse than just obfuscated, the actual identity of relativity and its actual identity of relationship to itself and the actual value of that and the actual significance of that, which is capable of being simultaneously greater than and more finite than that at the same time, because it is. Two identities of sequence / simultaneous nature are already further. It is already further greater and more finite. So it was already bigger than and more finite than. the smallest part of space/existence since before it was generated. And that gained its complete volumes, complete identity relationship to itself, and the value of that simultaneously increasing from this spot inside space nature, and or at least how relevant to where and how proofs of it is that where and how this is where consciousness can be demonstrated too, of how there is simultaneously an absence and not and or not. Like, for example, where and how, this is a theory now. There are 1,095 days in 3 years because of how, for example, one hyperadditive identity of volume became one value distinctly from, but while as itself, as a semi-nature relationship to itself, coupled with the active diffusion from that. So the ancients more probably that used pantheism referred to, that referred to scientifically the heartbeat of Allah, where and how the ancients more probably and more practically, the ancients would say, like, just like we could see space, invisible but still discernible between physical objects with our sight. And there is more of this space that is not matter than there is space. I forgot what I was thinking. Grilled cheese. Grilled cheese, all right. Processed cheese, but I eat stuff like junk sometimes. Usually I like to, I'd rather eat for junk like cereal. But I have to train. I have to feed, so I have the child abusers contacts. What they do, what it's tied to, is where and how they have the identities of principles. They have the identities of lawyers, of judges, court prosecutors, the identities of those locations. Shown needs to pretend to be, shown needs simultaneously, preemptively to come. So they're going to need to hide live progressions, and we're needing to, because of simultaneously need to hide ones from the past as what is active, as the identities of the ground that speak for and or spoke for the law. This breaching method knew that they would be fake integrity, needing to pretend other as a certain type of victim predator. But if we referred only to them as victims and trace the metaphysics that way, people will jump into our conversation with these known individual grouped and together mass physical delusions and primitive factual nature qualities and aspects shared by the groupthink, quote, groupthink, unquote, quoting Donald Rumsfeld or President Bush. Knowns and unknowns, quoting Donald Rumsfeld. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, quoting the Bible. No. See, this breaching method knew that people were going to get over on knowledge. People were going to use their knowledge of subjects to lie about them. In other words, everyone. about the significance of it per where and how the sciences share an identity that is better than living. That which generated matter from nowhere has a better than living identity of relationship to itself, as a better than living identity of volume, and as the increasing value of that. So we were directed by the Old Testament to write this down, but honesty has not allowed even spoken to be even spoken about, let alone the significance of it to be addressed. That which is spoken before all those parts of the Quran about of the Old Testament. The Quran too, not by accident, has a part 2 right up at front. All someone needs to do is understand this. You're either going to agree to refer to the identity of the hyper simultaneous. It doesn't use that phrase. It's not in our language. No, as Allah or not. And you're not supposed to pray in a mosque that you don't think people are being honest about that, which is hyper simultaneous to while as itself. So already being and having been employed. Oh, I'm so and such. I'm from this country, or I'm from this country, and this is my friend from this country. These are all groupings, tactical terror from how the human volume sciences actually has us individually grouped together and tied to our where and how we're actually properly supposed to be syntactically manifest, reception of ourselves. They only allow haters to speak, and they get away with it by hiding the sequence shifts, pretending that others are haters when they can't get through the phones. After those network locations attach us to fake words, had lies told about us to themselves, and them telling other lies additional to that as themselves with that, because they have remote uses of those locations through time already. All kind of motivations individually grouped in together. So America better hurry up and get me a response, Connecticut. So I have to keep asking and demonstrating I know more about your little sick fakes and databases than you people know that you are sick fakes, punks. When it comes to black and white, it has nothing to do with it. That's why you're sick fake punks. You just blame. You have logics that blame other things, others yourselves. The breaching method, which is increasingly valued to proper reception of American history, other countries' histories, is the same thing. Everyone was forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to roll with that colonization value nature systems. Give a junk if they took down narratives towards slavery. They left it entrenched. They left out uses of it too in the North, not just the known uses of it. Uses of it, again, where and how they applied that to meanings and to functions, assigned values that had nothing to do with it, specifically so they could engineer motivations, natures, needs, interests at all locations other than its own, kept needing to hide the same sequence as finite progressive lies. For example, and truths, keeping needing to hide the same truths at the same time, need to pretend they don't realize. Like, for example, the truth that a breaching method caused slavery, not our founding parents. All exceptions in exception nature are a demonstration of the same thing. Everyone was a fact, human nature slave. And if anyone tried to speak other or break the system that kept it this only capable of being, they would be sensed by the breaching method that sensed it through the people that had them roles with that. And if they find out, then they hurt each other individually, grouped and together. So recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. We don't have one legal identity capable of dealing with wars, honestly, because they were backed into treatments of positive and negative, simultaneously identity treatments, where and how they had replaced the proper answers, the proper treatments of positive and negative, of the invisible but still discernible, such as predicate value. See, a predicate is a distinct identity of relationship to itself as a verb, as an identity of law, invisible but still discernible. And a predicate act is an act, but it's a demonstration of an identity of relationship to itself that the actor has that is as criminal insidiousness. Now, this is why it is critical to understand where and how they legalized criminal insidiousness nature, knowing that nature will demonstrate you can't legalize it. Nature is in control of the nature of the law. We're through it. It's now through a breaching method system, made self-valued roles individually grouped and together, having been colonized, because at least they became a country. A certain kind of victim predator that leaders become and stay only capable of being, because all locations, areas, and states still criminally foreign influenced. Positive treatments and negative treatments of collusion against every identity, against every title, while as they're against themselves, while as trying to help themselves. Simultaneously, delusion's wrong. And that differentially critically relevant, especially relevant too, to subjects treatments. So I want to thank you people for coming out tonight. I think everybody left. You got some of that stuff with the real cheese and the right amount of butter on it, cooked just right. Oh man, you're in heaven. People tell me to make cooking videos. I should make a cooking video. I think I should make I don't know what to, I watched on YouTube a recipe. I tried to make it. I forgot what they call it. It's like pancetta. There's like another version of pancetta, and you mix it and you make a cream sauce with out of Parmesan, but it becomes creamy if you do it right. I didn't do it right. I think it starts with a B. It's not bolognese. It's like I have to remember that name. I can't remember now. But I'm so I shouldn't have mentioned it, but I can't remember the name. But there's some good recipes on YouTube. And I just learned the other day how to make. I don't know. It was on YouTube. It was on. I searched on Google. I googled how to make frosting. When I was a kid, they showed us in cooking class. They just take Crisco and they put sugar in it and make wedding cake frosting. One could also take just a stick of butter, chop it up, then you put confectioner sugar on it, and you mix it, and a little bit of what is that stuff called? Not almond extract. That stuff is wicked powerful. Vanilla extract. You only need a little drop of that too, but it's not even the littlest drop. If you put the littlest drop possible of the almond extract, stuff's too strong to me. Like, why do they make the almond extract? Okay, thank you, people. Have a great night. And so, how we could end war in Ukraine instantly is by agreeing, not for forgiveness, for the reasons people think, but forgiveness for the fact, human nature, quality, premises, defenses, A, therefore B, and what came before that. We only have a bunch of sick, fake frauds as experts. That's one of the things that is hyper evidential when people speak for black/white, and that's hyper native pure. We can fix that, and that was self-valued. how there was no distinction between us, and how all distinctions were exception nature and demonstration of the same thing, and that was commonly self-valued. Evolution's fruits and gifts and means come from no understanding this. This method understood how we are actually in electrical engineering as factory of nature, as actually an identity of the ground, value/value progression. This breaching method measures and maintains. Syntax nature is incapable of being honest when teaching about why and how there is ground as value in part with the syntax, physics and metaphysics, and identity involvements involved with electrical engineering. I'm not even an electrical engineer. So I'm not a computer expert. They recorded themselves lying about valuing how they lie about the significance of time, simultaneously too fast, too slow, about the significance of the complicated, about the significance of really about what's really complicated and what's really simple. Using time simultaneously too fast, so leaving out exception nature, with testimonies regarding this. We have not had legal representation that has not been criminally foreign influence since some ancient times. Prepare our minds. Species body, species coach is, in other words, we could the species will agree if you nuclear holding nations and other crazy things like that holding nations, even needing to, is proof that the breaching method hurt you sickly distinctly from ourselves. And ourselves, it proves that we know we were hurt sickly distinctly too. To keep how sickly non-distinctly, not only undiscerned, but self-value with the naive reactions to it, like defenses of people's of the identity of police and other people's narratives about the police. Get them from the names forging and switching into branch real fast, Americans. And Connecticut, make sure I get a response for them and for the principal child abusers campus and for their roles fabricating emails with the FBI, state police, and Wethersfield police and other towns' police departments involved with the such wire crimes with NBC Connecticut News, WFSB, and Fox Connecticut News. They are also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, lying about their passions and emotions when we respond to such, while simultaneously lying about their passions and emotions about us. You're going to see how more natures and methods of sick interests than there are even streets in your town, including the number of houses on your town, leveraged against each. So one must teach. It's free speech. You'll learn really why and how people could stay motivated to deny what is overtly slash insidiously true. Fake branches fall to ground, then seed comes through, then real comes through. They've been hiding lies from Judge Napolitano, sickly distinctly from the female judges associated with the networks, or Judge, I forget, how could I forget her name? Judge Janine Perro. But they did this against Judge Napolitano first sequentially. And they need her to deny that. And they get away with it because of how they use consciously, functionally, where and how they knew that nature was going to demonstrate people lying about the motivations of our founders per roles with law and the elements of our founders that couldn't afford and can't afford the revelations they left us to teach about themselves and about the Constitution unabridged. Where and how roles teaching other were actually being and having been found in place. Pace. So many names with Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed victim predator reactions to the roles with federal crimes, with people tied to former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with his co-defendants and their family members. Involved also with predicate acts on off Wethersfield um, Police Department through time, and houses next to the state prison offices involved coordinated identity thefts and frauds at corners of buildings and uses of confession rolls with uses of the schools. There are people associated with the policing of the schools that have further roles with arrests and uses of arrests, where and how the interbranch and the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones are key to kept needing to hide the same sequence, yet final active progressive roles and lies together, and uses of naive A, therefore B logic, leaving out exceptions, exception nature, relevant to where and how what is actually recorded more crime methods than there are streets in our towns upon us. Through the only counters per relevant to they affect instances specifically to have people incapable of going back and be honest about how they actually knew other people and other things, and they use their roles with the police and the overt criminal enterprises and private ones and insidiousness of other natures and roles on off body dumping spots and crime scenes used criminally for and influenced. Like, for example, all kinds of arrests of kids and uses of patterns of criminality with the kids that are involved with where and how they further confessions to keep them next to even with fake instances, so that they can't go. In other words, lying about how the kids are next to each other. They're lying about their natures of relationship to each other, and the pretending passions and emotions, so they can't go back and be and afford discern that which is actually recorded. So they're increasingly roles with the breaching method through their other motivations, natures, needs, interests, all kept using the same styles too, that way. Styles of logic that cannot afford logic scores. So there are actors and there are industry people of media locations that pretend passions and emotions for when they use syntax, regarding when they use phrases like mental health or therapy or tell people or addiction, like regarding their own addictions and mental weaknesses. They are pretending it's strength. And they're pretending weakness. This is also relevant to the treatments of the war. See, a real leader, honest leader, and capable one would know that wherever there is strength or fragility, there is the other. There is the simultaneous, and there is additionally the hyper simultaneous, because the simultaneous is additionally positive or negative to itself. And it's increasingly additionally relative to uses of criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments associated with the black and white treatments, associated with the degraded time impositions imposed upon me. I should be raging livid by now in the course of this logic per uses of the revelations, protracting from these short words. True always, not denying exceptions, and that are greater than and more finite than, while being capable than your experts' words that blame racism, things like that, things that are variably true, rather than things that are constantly true. Slavery was caused by a predicate acts delivery system method that was simultaneously multi-front, a criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method that was simultaneously multi-front too. Uses of the value of that. And that was manifest, and is manifest as a slander, as a identity theft / fraud / slander method, inherent, active, and progressive to the styles of logic that are allowed to be heard speaking. Those at the end of the whip, as those in response, non-response, and uses of the arrays regarding the opinions of who to blame or how to react. Now that it's in the process where the person's at the end of the whip, we're in the war. The body of Ukraine is being whipped and murdered. The species body is bleeding. They're blaming one person, specifically as Styles, though, to prevent where how one person, when we're dealing with one person, as an identity is forced to speak as in a body, a country, for the function of our species volume, where it is syntactically tied, actually, to. So there's a Dr. Gilmore involved with Susan Gilmore and various people. I don't know if it's the same Gilmore associated with Christina Zioka, but there are a whole bunch of doctors from the Institute of Living and their family members involved with predicate acts with houses next to schools, intercities, through time connected. Now, these are not people legitimately having been into branch originally and still. Even though there are exceptions in nature, there are demonstrations of the same thing. People A through Z. Presidents, all the presidents we have failed to speak honestly for anger or for calmness relative to the identity of relativity, that subject treatments, that the subject / S, like slavery was and is, also used to means by the breaching method effectively to measure and maintain, everyone not realizing, but using style screening its roles with uses of it. One cannot address slavery but the way it wanted and needs if we don't address the breaching method that put it there. If we don't address the uses of it as actually manifest. You want to torture us, put us through a sick movie about slavery, make it worse by putting a whole bunch of sick fake punks to speak about those movies afterwards, for example. In other words, if you're going to speak about subject treatment serious, then in other words, you keep it real, and you don't make real that sick psychopath, sociopath, pretending not to understand that nature's nature and the value of that is distinct from nature alone, pretending not to understand that and how all those slavery movies left out the breaching method. Yeah! In other words, you have a little bunch of, you have people involved with the databases since before computers that are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, remote uses of roads, routes, corners of streets, corners of buildings. So in other words, you guys sought me out with the people that called you and had you sitting at the corner on Bolton, Bolton, whatever. And you want to debate such. You better get me a response for too. I want to know if that was one of those curb people with that little black car, with that corner of that street there. And make sure, because these are people involved with the Town Line Drive, with the name Cololo, and tomorrow also recorded, confessed with a whole bunch of other people. Dominic Abate, other people all along Route 3. There's a Abate florist I never had a conversation with Dominic in my life. They made a fake exception to pretend other on Facebook. Has something to do with people associated with the wooden tap and the intelligence community and the FBI and CIA and their family members and some military police. You know, people that lied to their girlfriends that went to my grammar school, who had already been put involved with identity thefts and frauds methods from other classrooms. So there's no way to counter lying about their motivations. They made fake exceptions to pretend to know me and to lie about my behavior with others. They're lying about one of the things they're doing commonly with the breaching method is needing to lie about their perception of the behavior of others. And that's why it's relevant where and how they confess, demonstrate, and record they are criminally foreign influenced. Your interbranch family members and the exception nature tied to them at the youngest ages. This method knew they would. This method knew that the nature of American history, as our founders left it, it would demonstrate to us that a breaching method is involved. Criminal insidiousness nature is involved. Criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments that are simultaneously identity treatments. And that is simultaneously so we could discern the identity of the hypersimultaneous, which is furthered itself distinctly, and while being non-distinctly so discernible. So learnables to each, in other words, there's human breaching method, a breach. You get some of this. So someone told, please, Mr. Putin, don't hurt the Klitschko brothers. Boxing. We could fight the way that hurts not one, and evolution's fruits and gifts means come from nowhere. The whole species value nature could value all the worst things simultaneously the right way. There's a difference between valuing, okay, there's a difference between logic that says, okay, A, therefore B, thank God, we don't have to worry about that. And they leave out distinction. Because everyone that says a certain type of fact should be nature nay. That stays increasingly valued to all subjects treatments individually grouped and together. Where and how we approach speaking for the law, the physics of the law, the nature of the law, the sequence of the law. What is actually recorded, the people who've been using words like crimes have been involved with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, remote uses of the ground locations. Thank God by worse. I think there's a difference between saying God, thank God, to make positive out of negative, or saying thank God to make positive out of negative that is also positive unto itself. In other words, there is a way to make criminal insidiousness natures of positives out of negatives. But there is also, that's because how it is necessary, and that's how positive or negative value nature progressions are demonstrated. They are invisible, but still they're hyper invisible, but still discernible. In other words, so if it stays about weapons, beyond where it is naturally about weapons, wars are won or fought are won before they fight. They are usually. For example, I don't know who said, my father told me this. Anybody can beat anyone in boxing. That's one of the things. He also told me the nose goes was one of the first rules of boxing. But then a couple times he told me anyone could beat anyone in boxing. Especially at that level, it's true. Like, in other words, once you know how to fight. Once you know how to fight, you've had some fights because because it's unnatural. Not because fighting is unnatural. Fighting in contexts where all locations, areas, and states have been criminally foreign influenced to an extent that only increased since founding. All exceptions, exception, nature, and demonstration of the same thing. So the entire species needs to observe where and how white / black, therefore, every color, every difference, real made up differences, is being and having been employed so easily, so easy to discern. Specifically to have that defended qualities of fact, human nature, who can't defend them themselves and afford the revelations that wisdom and speaks, that actually is used, they use the simultaneous actually properly. The greatest expert at any of the sciences, greatest expert on the economy. They left out the exception nature of where and how. Not just slavery sickly distinctly against every single person, including our founders, is proofs /s that and how no one originally and still can speak for the economy properly. You guys aren't using exception nature, of course, because there are distinct identities of exception nature. And because the intelligence community is filming fake things to pretend there's exceptions to what people say. They're making it look like things are recorded, and so they can go where they use time simultaneously too fast, too slow, simultaneously too slow. In courts today, with police forms today, the same way they do it since they were found, they were overtly even more / insidiously even more criminally foreign influence. What are witch trials about? About a bunch of criminally foreign influence, victim, predator, fact, human natures, and styles, incapable of defending themselves and affording was actually going on to be discerned because everyone else is in collusion with it. And the breaching method, there are people not even there involved with it. Colonization is about remote uses of America from abroad. Colonization itself was just used remotely. Vaccines. So I teach you things, but long. This is how they use mayors. They use mayors, a certain type of victim predator. There's a former mayor Gold and people that used to live he lived on a corner of the street. I have to remember to get the street. Hey! He's involved with some threats against me and against my family and various natures of, federal crimes with evidences, federal rules of evidences crimes, natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders rolls, falsified police reports rolls, wire crime acts and rolls, child abuses rolls, same people involved with elderly homes used criminally foreign influence with them. I'd fear the God to hide, not give me response for the cops in the court switching and forging names and the people tied to them. And I caught them with the principal child abuser before that was happening. See, the courts recorded themselves using crime methods like charging people with harassment. That when they have people call up the people that write their police reports for them, including police forms and courts, and lying about their family members, using them as little tools in their rat trap game, criminally foreign influence use of their locations. They never had integrity. Make sure they get on paper. Get me a response. Who denies what I said with New Britain Superior Court? Was the Hartford courts involved? No! Let's get them on paper. Someone tells you to respect and fix the fake news. WFSB, NBC Connecticut News, and Fox Connecticut News. Say sorry for attaching me and others to fake. That were in the context of the World Trade Center right before the attack, no till, in the Ninth Circuit Court right next to it. These are all people involved with sequence shifts leading up to that case that was in Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center right before the attack. And since There are people that plant sequence shifts, tied syntax narratives at locations that are also have been doing that on and off courts, where they've been stacking the databases of courts and of police departments with fake communications with people, because they have little kids in their families since they were kids. They went and had conversations with detectives associated with and as Detective Dillon, who's one of the ones involved with the houses next to the state prison offices and the state judicial branch offices, with houses near me, with adults, and since they were kids, involved with predicate acts with judges and prosecutors, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even if legitimate, even if and where they are legitimately undercover. They were also being and having been used by that breaching method that recorded has uses of where and how they had other uses of their confessions, demonstrations of roles with the uses of black, white that had nothing to do with it. And where they brought it up where it did have directly to do with that. Simultaneously, sickly, distinctly. See, honestly, you knows that is there. Just like just like we agreed to assign letters on the keyboards in our different languages, binary identities. And that's the process of how they're going to perceive which key was struck and in which sequence. Just like we agreed not to have the same plugs, but we agreed to use the same natures of voltage and things like that, so you could just use an adapter. But we are still individually grouped and together, tactical terrier, from how we are born bound and independent per nature system, tied to our syntax nature. So, all kinds of ways too. America, Russia, and Ukraine, and countries A through Z still have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed here and there roles with the criminally foreign influence uses of the campuses. Get them down. Please make a response for them too. Have them say sorry to Elizabeth, and don't make me use her whole name, because I want a response for the Joshua Stryker, because he was telling lies. He made all these confessions and lies to women that know my name since they were girls. I don't know their names. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed the intelligence community involved criminally foreign influence with private and with people tied to body dumping spots, unions were involved with union thefts and stuff like that, all tied to their confessions real fast at locations like corners of buildings with the people, because they had people involved with it that went to my schools. And one thing they had shared commonly was they went out of their way for identity thefts, frauds, and slanders, instances, roles, and with uses of that are being and having been communicated to me and to others by themselves and by the others associated with them. Not just the breaching method, but the interbranch too, differentially, especially relevant to proper differential subjects treatments and uses of the invisible, but still discernible and how functional. Same way that we can preserve, we can perceive and sense way more things than a computer can at once. So they have A, therefore B logic, and they have agreements regarding money and things like that with the nature of the business, with the computers. People aren't led by honesty while pretending other. They're increasingly self-valuing how all treatments of the law, physically and nature of the law, and identity treatment simultaneously being and having been criminally foreign influence. Okay, have a great night, Ron Adams. I'm about to get off, though. Now, I will do a cooking show. I will do a cookie expo. I have to think of what to make. Maybe I'll do a remake on someone else's recipe. What's his name? I forgot his name. Malto Mario says, just get it, what's fresh. Emerald says, bam. Bam Bam says, bam, bam. And what's that? I have a Chow Italia cookbook. Betty Crocker. Betty Crocker says, no, what else? All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you for listening. Please, that's how we could end war. All we have to do is admit that and how the people pretending to be able to speak for truth are the people involved with preventing it, too. As they're the people involved with using people with Fox News and people with CNN recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, distinctly, not distinctly, and simultaneously. They use words like crimes, criminally foreign influence, simultaneously with delusions raw, simultaneously aware of, from off campuses, being and having been leveraged influences to keep up worse than obfuscated. Those short words and revelations our founders really left us to opine, convict, and theorize by. I love heavy cream. Like if you take a sauce, you put a little bit of heavy cream in at the end. I have to pay more attention. I've done it at the end. I've done it where you cook it a little bit longer, but I never took the time to discern the difference. I don't cook that often. Sauce too. If you take a clam juice and you put clam juice in regular sauce, it makes it nice. So we have all plastic in the ocean. There's complete possession, not only over the pseudo sophistication at locations A through Z of the human body, but of uses of that as styles pretending not to realize, as nature's pretending not to realize. So as nature's increasingly incapable of defending fact achievements and fact achieving nature, capable of using short words and their protraction, capable of countering things properly like slavery, like the impositions upon the people most logistically hurt by that. New York City overtly / insidiously criminally foreign influence, unfree, tortured. So they get away with this by pretending to be against religion. We'll examine how the Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut is involved with slavery in New York originally and still, as slavery is interstates involved with crime methods with various niches of courts and police forms, fabricating audio and video with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. There's that certain kind of sick fake punk that pretends they are other when they speak for positive or negative in identity. That I'll show you how to get through. But we have to have mandated law followed. So also it is recorded being and having been employed, how they have roles with self-value juxtaposed natures of abuses of little boys and girls. See the little girls that forces them to speak to people through others, leaving out exceptions and exception nature. So they're demonstrating to the little boys roles with collusion, with people criminally foreign influence, identity thefts and frauds, little fake punks and backgrounds. They get away with it because of the formal interbranch and foreign and how they've been in collusions. So Central Connecticut State University has individuals that were criminally foreign influenced when I was a kid from Washington, D.C. Like, for example, Robert Luskin and his lawyer and a whole bunch of people tied to them. A whole bunch of names at Central Connecticut State University involved with predicate acts that were timed on and off that place in New Britain with people that timed ones on and off my street here in Wethersfield and other places I lived when I lived in New Britain too. as the same ones on my street, involved with since I was a kid with these games. I've been Molto Mario. Was it Molto Mario or Malt Shop Mario? I don't know. And it sells ice cream containers on Craigslist. I heard this Craigslist list. I never saw. I never looked at Craigslist. I assume Craigslist.com. I don't know. The Basilisk Johnson has been precluded for the involvement in the scandal. Who's Balsac Johnson? Is that a real person? Okay, I'm going to bed. I have to go eat dinner. Brian Adams. Because now you may be hungry too. I've been out here 2 hours and 35 minutes. In other words, I keep remembering about Ukraine. I see the faces of the Klitschkos. And I know what's going on because they're mayors. I know what's going on because they have roles with psychology tied to courts and prisons. They've been needing to hide lipoaggressions. They've been needing to hide pretending to be integrity where they are incapable of being integrity. So it comes down to, uses of war and things like that, logistics. Leave out exception nature. Good night, Ron. Have a good night.